Hello everyone, welcome to Crypto Basics Coach podcast. I'm Marco. I'm here to help people navigate this topic so as to benefit from the opportunity this new technology provides and not get distracted or put off from the nonsense there is out there about crypto. Anything and everything presented and discussed, whether here or in our sessions, is of an educational nature and should never be taken as financial advice. Always do your due diligence and consult professionals before making any final decisions. Episode 4. Context is everything. The financial landscape. When I sit down with someone for the first time, whether it's a family member, a friend, or a new client, what I like doing is I like setting up the context. It's all fine and well understanding what crypto is, what it might be able to do for you, what its purpose is, etc. But it's even more important, I believe, to actually understand the context in which crypto is now being implemented and what's going on globally. And that way you can fully appreciate the timing of this opportunity. Some people won't appreciate that we have a finite amount of time to take advantage of this opportunity, just like people had a finite amount of time to take advantage of the opportunity in the internet when it first came out. And so it's important to not just understand what crypto is, what the technology does, how you can take advantage of it, but it's even more important to understand the full global picture of why, at this point in time, is crypto such an opportunity. So let's discuss for a moment what the world stage looks like and how things are currently set up, especially in the financial world. So since World War II, the US dollar has been the prominent or the most prominent currency that is used to settle many trades internationally, oil, gold around the world. And that was as a result of conversations, agreements, and things you can look into in more in-depth analysis after World War II. And since World War II, everything pretty much runs or is affected by the US markets, what the US dollar does. That's why you might be wondering why so many people are so focused on the American interest rates. Are they going to be reduced? Are they going to increase? What's going on over in the US markets? And it's because most of the money around the world is traded and is involved in investment products based in America. And so for the last 80 years, what's been happening is that most international trade, especially between countries, has been done using the US dollar. And this has given the US dollar quite a fair bit of power, as you can imagine. And if you look back in history, you'll see that before the US dollar, there was the British pound, there was the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Swiss. Each one had their turn as being the reserve currency of the world. And what you'll find that's interesting, if you look into it, is that most reserve currencies last somewhere between 80 to 100 years. And usually what happens is that they end up imploding, or usually in war, what will happen is that the winner of that war, whoever prevails, ends up having the dominating currency. And so for 80 years, we've had the US as being the reserve currency of the world. And back in 1971, I think it was, the president at the time, Nixon, decided to take the currency off the gold standard. Before that, currencies were pretty much pegged to gold. So 1 ounce of gold would equal $1. And in 1971, that standard was taken away, and the dollar became what they call a floating currency. And it was just going to be backed by government and the economy of that particular country. So since 1971, we've had a floating dollar. Now, the banks have been rapt about that because that has allowed them to expand credit. The Fed and many other central banks have also been able to, the term that you'll hear is print money. And that seems all fine and well on the surface of it because, if there's more money going around, more people are buying, the economy looks fantastic. But what it does is it actually sets up an inevitable conclusion at the end of it where you'll end up having way too much debt. That can also lead to massive inflation, and eventually the currency basically blows up. So the landscape at the moment globally is almost every single country has a massive debt issue. And that debt issue, as you can imagine, can't just keep going on forever. They've done very well at pushing the can or kicking the can down the track, but eventually it's going to come home to roost. And so right now we find ourselves in a very interesting time in human history. We have the most recent reserve currency that is essentially reaching the end of its life. Now, that doesn't mean that the US dollar as we know it may disappear altogether. The US dollar is still going to stick around, but whether it's going to continue having the dominance that it's had worldwide, that's an argument for another day, and when you start looking into it, you'll be able to form your own conclusion. But what is happening is that the amount of debt, the amount of inflation, eventually, some people call it a reset, is that we're going to have to do something about it. And what's interesting is crypto or digital technology has come along at a very opportune moment. As I said before, normally what would happen, especially at the end of a reserve currency, is usually there would probably be a war, and the prevailing winner would end up probably declaring their currency as being the world reserve currency. In this instance, it would seem as though digital security or digital assets are going to perhaps prevent that from happening, and a more peaceful, amicable arrangement is being coordinated. And so these cryptos are coming along at a time where there are many countries around the world who are no longer happy to use or have or be dictated to by the US and their reserve currency, and they've been looking at ways of transacting among themselves using different methods. And I'll touch on the BRICS in just a few moments. But at the moment, what we have is we have a reserve dollar, which is essentially declining in its use. We have world debt, which is at the highest it's ever been and still increasing. Governments don't seem to, at this moment anyway, they don't seem to have any responsibility in reducing that, so they're just going to continue printing money. As soon as the interest rates are lowered in the States, you'll start to see more money printing going on there as well. And it essentially dilutes the value of the dollar in any particular currency, in any particular country. And that's simply because you have more of it. And as some of you may already understand, if you have great supply in any particular product, its value is going to go down. If you've got restricted supply, value normally goes up. And so there's a number of things that are occurring at the moment around national debts, around inflation, around this reset that is coming, where you can listen to someone like Clive Thompson, for example. He has a great way of explaining to what resets look like. For those of you who might be listening to this thinking, really, Marco, a reset? What does that look like? Well, if you live in a country that's done well for the last 80 years, you may not understand or have experienced what a reset looks like. But if you lived in Venezuela, if you lived in Argentina, if you lived even in Greece or Cyprus, you might find that currency resets have actually occurred in many countries in the last 80 years, and they can take different forms. You could potentially go to bed on a Friday night and find out that all the banks are closed, and they will be for a few days, and on the Monday they open up, and what you'll find is that there's a new currency, and the government will let you know how much of your old currency you can transfer into your new currency. And for some people, what that means is not all of their wealth in cash will be allowed to be transferred over to the new currency, and they'll effectively suffer a loss. For other people, it'll be a full exchange to the new currency. And for the majority of the population, given their finances, they probably won't miss a beat. In fact, they may even be paid a little bit of money to take on board the new currency. So resets can take all shapes and forms. Look into it. Listen to Clive Thompson. He goes through different examples of what it might look like. But essentially, the clock is reset. And as of a particular date, a new currency takes place. And there are some that theorize that cryptocurrencies are a nice soft migration of moving people into that new currency. Time will tell. Some people think it could happen as early as the next 6 months to 24 months. Some people think it takes longer. It's up for debate how long it may take. The point is that there is a point of reckoning that's going to come. Governments can't be allowed to just continually create as much debt as they have, and it's going to come home to roost. And so one of the interesting factors when people look into this, that when you're investigating is that central banks have been, coincidentally I'm sure, in the last 5 years, they've been accumulating more gold than they ever have in human history. And you have to ask yourself the question, well, why would they be buying and hoarding and collecting gold? If everything is fine, if the economies are fine, if the currencies are fine, why would they be purchasing so much gold, more than ever before? And there is an abundance of statistics. There's even some good YouTube channels that you can plug into to get an idea of what is going on in the precious metals industry. But what you'll find is that central banks right around the world have been buying a lot of gold. And the consensus is the reason they've been doing that is because they're getting prepared for the reset. And when that reset occurs, everyone believes that, or most people believe, that gold is going to form some sort of a foundation again for the new currency. And now it may not be a 1-to-1 ratio as it might have been in the past, but it is going to have some basis. And so countries and central banks are getting themselves positioned so I guess they can have a bit more say in what the new system is going to look like, especially if it's going to be based on gold. Some say it's going to be based on a basket of commodities to allow countries that perhaps don't have as much gold to also partake. But you've got to ask yourself the question, if central banks, and I think it's safe to call them smart money, if central banks are buying that much gold, should you? And that's a topic for another conversation, but just ask the question, investigate, educate, and then you can come up with your own answer. So that's one point that's going on around resets, new currencies, as central banks are purchasing a lot of gold. The other thing that's occurring is some of you may be familiar with BRICS. Some of you may not. BRICS is an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And if you haven't been paying attention, that group of countries have somewhere in the order of 20 plus other countries. Collectively, they apparently make up more than 50% of the population on the planet. And what they're doing is they're essentially working and have been working on a way of being able to transact among themselves for resources, for services, whatever the case might be, and not use the US dollar. And again, what better way of doing that than the use of cryptos? Because as hopefully by now you know and you understand, cryptos are they're trustless. You can use multiple different chains. You can use them for exchange. You don't need to have anyone in the middle. And especially given recently what America has done with the US dollar, and they've weaponized it. They've, through SWIFT, they've restricted certain countries to be able to transact, to be able to do things. Some might say for the right reasons. I'm not here to debate that. But the fact is, functionally, someone can control the switch. And if you can imagine yourself being in a situation where the bank turns around and says, well, we're no longer going to store your money, we're no longer going to let you transact, how would you feel? So these countries have an incentive for breaking away from the current system. They've been getting great strides into essentially rebuilding the infrastructure as we have it today around central banks, around gold exchanges, all sorts of systems that the Western world has been using for many, many years. And they're going quietly about creating a separate system to the one that we all know and use at the moment. And again, if you look into it and educate yourself around the BRICS and what they're doing and how they're doing it, you'll quickly realize that things are changing. They have changed. It's not about if, it's about when that these things will take place. And most people agree that the future world around the financial landscape is going to be a dual system, a parallel system, if you will. It won't be just the one that we have at the moment with predominantly SWIFT in control and the US dollar in control. It is most likely going to be set up where everyone can still transact with one another, but there'll be probably two dominant systems that will run in parallel. So please look into the topics that just discussed. As I say, for me, it's just as important understanding the context of what is going on around the world, because that'll help you understand why is crypto such an opportunity at the moment. It's not just about the technology. You have to appreciate that there have been many great technologies in human history that have just died by the wayside because they haven't been implemented. So it doesn't matter how great crypto technology is if it doesn't have a need. And remember, I'm a big use case person. If it doesn't have a use case, then who cares how good the technology is? And because of all these political, financial, geopolitical situations that are going on, there is an absolute huge opportunity for crypto to provide a lot of solutions that a lot of people are looking for. And that's where the true opportunity is when you've got the timing, plus you've got the technology being developed, and that it's all coming together at the same time. So there's a number of factors you can look into. One of the things that, as you know, in the previous episode, I gave some homework out about the stable coins. In this episode, one of the things you should look into is, are central banks privately owned or public? Or are they government departments? And what two organizations sit above them? Once you look into that topic, again, you'll start to understand a little bit better how the world is set up financially, how certain things work. And again, where does crypto come into this? What problems does it solve? Where are the opportunities? I'll talk to you next time. Cheers. If you found this information helpful and are interested in a more hand-holding approach while navigating this complex industry, please visit cryptobasicscoach.com, that's basics with an S, and book a session. The first 30-minute session is free, and we can get to know each other, talk about what your aims are, what you're looking to do, and how I might be able to possibly help. I've helped people get started, set up exchange accounts, wallets, DeFi platforms, and general knowledge. Look forward to speaking with you. Cheers.